This is part 2 of the Celtic Creation Myth series. It goes without saying that part 1 is the foundation of what I will say in this video, and it should be watched first. This second part requires some background. First, as the great 20th century scholar of Prajapati, Jan Gonda, shows, the figure called That One from the Nasadiya Sukta creation hymn of the Rig Veda is just another name of the god called Prajapati. That One emerges from the dark waters at the dawn of creation, and he is called the Sat, that is, the existent, while the dark waters that he emerges from are identified with the Asat, the non-existent, according to the hymn. Even though this Nasadiya Sukta carries a clearly archaic myth form, closely matching the creation myths of Norse, not to mention Celtic and Egyptian mythology, wherein a first being emerges up from the dark waters, we don't need to only rely on this hymn. The Atharva Veda 10.7 hymn to the Skamba pillar, which is the symbol of Brahman, the Absolute, according to Gonda, proclaims that within this Absolute pillar, both the waters and Brahma, another name often treated as interchangeable with Prajapati, that is, non-being and its contrast, being, are each contained. Thus the waters and Brahma aka Prajapati are both contained within the Absolute pillar. This closely matches the wording and philosophical framing of the Nasadiya Sukta, in which That One, Prajapati, emerges from the dark and signless waters, thereby forming a duality between the waters and the nameless being emerging from them. It is then said in the hymn that the sages discovered the kinship between the non-existent and the existent, the Sat and the Asat, suggesting that the waters are aligned with the non-existent, and the being that emerges from them, That One, is aligned with the existent, just as in the hymn to the Skamba pillar, aligning the waters and Brahma. This fundamental contrast of non-existent and existence is another way of saying non-being and being, or chaos and order. The equivalency between That One and Prajapati that we have suggested, also known as Visvakarman and Hiranyagarbha, is well established in the scholarship of Gonda. And the archaic nature of this myth and the myths of this figure Prajapati is thoroughly borne out simply by comparing these myths with other branches, as we will do. These basic facts are the starting point when comparing the Vedic creation myth with the Celtic and Norse. The validity of our understanding of Prajapati, aka That One, will be shown by how perfectly it matches the Irish parallel in particular, in which the cosmic sacred tree god is in the position where we would expect Prajapati, and the Vedic Prajapati is said to have the sacred tree growing from his head and to be of its nature. Furthermore, this confirmation naturally works in both directions, because the details of the early portion of the Irish creation myth, leading up to Eibhir Finn, align so well with the early portion of the Vedic creation myth. This suggests that our claims in part 1 of this video series were accurate. If we find the source of creation right where we would expect it in relation to Eibhir Finn as his great-grandfather, along with a dozen other matching details, then Eibhir Finn's war against Eriu and Mac Graine is solidified as the war to divide earth and sky, as we have suggested it to be. The point I'm trying to get across is that the very largeness of this pattern supports what I am arguing from every angle. It would not be possible to align so many pieces unless they really do form the full creation myth of the Celts. This huge pattern once again mutually reinforcing the pattern as we can read it hazily in the Vedic texts. So, if the Irish had preserved right in front of our faces a near-perfect copy of the Vedic, quote-unquote, creation myth, complete with a clear Brahman figure, you would surely want to know about that. Can you imagine what such a parallel between such distant branches would tell us about Proto-Indo-European religion? Leave it to the Irish to have done just that, preserved a near facsimile of the Vedic creation myth, a fact somehow missed by scholars for millennia. All hail the never-vanquished Druids. This is like walking through the park and stubbing your toe on the tip of an ancient pyramid poking up through the dirt, which until then had been treated as stray rubble, graffitied and covered in debris. No more ignorance. Let's lay it out in brief. In my articles, I identified the Invasion of the Sons of Mil episode of the Leor Gawala Erin, the Book of Invasions, as the Irish creation myth, by first identifying the more detailed Welsh version found in the Mabinogi tale, Bronwyn, daughter of Llyr, and then showing how this illuminates the identities of the figures in the Irish version. Thus, the true identity of Eibhir Finn, one of the sons of Mil, is equivalent to Rudra or Odin. And in the Sons of Mil invasion, he and his brothers divide or break up the marriage union of Mother Earth, that is, Eriu, aka Ireland, and Father Sky, that is, Mac Grania. I demonstrated the equivalency of Eriu and Mother Earth in my article on the conception of the Indo-European sun god. This division of sky from earth by the Rudra-type god is the crux of the whole creation, as when Odin divides the hermaphroditic unity called Ymir into sky and earth to create the world. Fionn, the white or the knower, is unquestionably the name of the Irish Rudra-type god. Fionn, or Finn, is the god of the Mannerbund, the Fianna, as with Rudra and his band of Rudras or Vratyas. His Welsh cognate, Gwyn, is Lord of the Wild Hunt, as we see with Odin. He is the god who has the myth paralleling Odin on the tree. Fionn 3 times swims the lake of the Cailleach, which turns all things white, equivalent to Urd's well, is aged to an old man, drinks from a magical cup, and then fasts underneath a magical tree in order to gain the power of prophecy. He is the god who gains wisdom and illumination from both a salmon and a magic well, and under the name Eibhir Finn, he divides the union of earth and sky in the primordial moment. When Eibhir Finn's identity and myth are properly understood, we can work backward up his genealogical tree to see what we can learn about the identities of the more primordial figures who came before him. The grandfathers of Odin and of Rudra are very significant figures in the creation, that is, Buri and Prajapati, respectively. In Rudra's case, his great-grandfather is technically the Brahman, or the Absolute itself, and in Odin's case, his great-grandfather does not appear, as there is only the waters and Ginnunga Gap at that level. Surely, Eibhir Finn's father, grandfather, and great-grandfather must be significant figures, leading up to the creation as they do. If what I'm saying is true, then Eibhir Finn's great-grandfather should be something similar either to the Brahman or to Ginnunga Gap, and the unfolding of the generations between this figure and Eibhir Finn should follow in every way that of the Vedic myth. That is a high bar, and yet it is met to an impossible degree of detail. So what do we see when we go to Eibhir Finn's great-grandfather and work our way down to Eibhir Finn? We meet a figure named Breoghan, who is lord of a tower in Brigantia. First of all, both the names Breoghan and Brigantia appear to share their root with the name Brahman at a Proto-Indo-European level. We can see in that context how reminiscent the names Breoghan and Brahman are of one another. That is not all, for the clearest symbol of the Brahman in the Vedic corpus is the Skamba pillar, according to Jan Gonda in Notes on Brahman, page 43, which is described in detail in Atharva Veda 10.7, where this pillar is called the fulcrum of all existence. As Brahman has his pillar as his symbol, Breoghan has his tower. Thus, pillar and tower can clearly be considered variations of one symbol. Authentic clan pedigrees of the Irish kings often go back to Breoghan and simply end there. He is the ultimate ancestor. One section of the Book of Invasions begins with the biblical account and leads all the way up to Breoghan, and then bottlenecks, and the section ends with him. Then a few sections later, after a different narrative, a new section begins with Breoghan and his tower and his offspring leading their invasion of Ireland. That is the creation myth. Clearly, the genealogy reaching from Adam to Breoghan is fabricated, an attempt to tie the biblical account into the native Irish mythology. And it is no mistake that this fabricated section ends right at Breoghan, and that the authentic Irish myth picks up again, beginning in a new section with none other than Breoghan, and with the events and names recognizable as Irish myth. Breoghan is the ultimate ancestor in Irish mythology, his myth woven by a very obvious seam into the fabricated generations reaching back to Adam. Now, the Vedic Brahman has a lower self of sorts, its manifest form within and equivalent to existence. This is called Prajapati, among other names such as That One. Prajapati, under the name That One, emerges from and differentiates himself from the waters of darkness or chaos. However, even though Prajapati is the manifest self of the higher Brahman, both the waters and Prajapati are part of the Brahman. Both are contained in his Skamba pillar, as the hymn states, and then differentiate from one another as chaos, that is the waters, becomes solid form, that is Prajapati, or That One. It is said in the myths of Prajapati that from Prajapati's head the sacred Ashvata tree grew, and that it was of Prajapati's nature. Thus, he is the cosmic tree god. This is only logical since he contains the whole realm of existence and is identified with it, and his higher self is the god of the pillar, a tree without foliage. The higher unmanifest symbol is the bare pillar. Its manifest self within existence is the blooming world tree. Each is the form of the same axis mundi. The Irish Breoghan's son, who is grandfather of Eibhir Finn, is named Bile. Bile is the name of the Irish sacred tree. If Breoghan was the Brahman, we would expect the son of Breoghan, who is the grandfather of Eibhir Finn, to be the world tree god, as Prajapati is, and so Bile's name is thus explained. This is why Bile, son of Breoghan, is named for the Irish sacred tree. Just as with Brahman and Prajapati, we have pillar god and sacred tree positioned one after the other in order of descent, as if the one is the higher form of the other, higher and lower forms of the axis mundi. Bile has a brother, another son of Breoghan, named Muirthemne, obscure sea. This is then the dark waters, the primordial waters of chaos, that Bile, or Prajapati, differentiates himself from. Both Bile and Muirthemne equally emerge from Breoghan's tower as brothers, just as the waters and the realm of the existent are both within the Skamba pillar. Prajapati, under the name That One, then auto-generates Kama, that is, desire, as his son, quote-unquote. Although the Rig Veda makes clear that this Kama is the semen of Prajapati, his primordial seed. This Kama then gives rise to, or becomes, Rudra. This is narrated in other myths of Prajapati, in which his seed becomes Rudra. Bile in the Irish version begets Mil, whose original Irish name is Galam. Galam means ardor, a synonym of desire or eros. When Kama becomes Rudra, Rudra then divides Father Sky from his progenitive union with his female half or daughter by means of an arrow shot, thus completing the primordial myth. For the Irish, Galam begets Eivir Fin and his brothers, who divide the union of Father Sky and Mother Earth by means of a battle, completing the primordial myth. Thus, the lines of descent are Irish, Breoghan of the Tower of Brigantia, his son Bile of the Sacred Tree, his son Galam, meaning ardor, his son Eivir Fin, who is the Rudraic type god and divides the marriage union of earth and sky. The Vedic descent is Brahman of the Skamba pillar, his son, or lower self, Prajapati, of the sacred tree, which grows from his head and is of his nature. His offspring that is autogenerated, Kama, or desire, which then gives rise to Rudra, who then divides the rape, or the union, of Sky and his daughter or female half. If we were presenting a true pattern here, and were lucky beyond hoping, then there might be other uncanny details surrounding the main line of descent that could confirm beyond a doubt that Breoghan is Brahman, and that this is a creation account exceedingly close to the Vedic one. We have just such uncanny details in the Irish account. The first son of Breoghan to leave the Tower of Brigantia and to go to Ireland is named Ith. Ith dies there, and this event sets off the invasion of Ireland by his brothers, which is the creation, as we have seen. Thus, because he is the first to leave the tower, and his action sets off the creation, Ith can be seen as a sort of first cause emanated from Breoghan. Ith, the name, means pap, corn, or grease. This implies some sort of fodder, a basic universal food, perhaps like a liquid food for infants, pap, if not a general grain. There is, in fact, a sort of first cause emanated from the Vedic Brahman as well. This is Viraj, who, conveniently enough, is identified with food. See Satapatha Brahmana 11.4.3.18, or with food and the eater of food. Clearly, this is an esoteric understanding of food, food as the first emanated cosmic substance, making possible the cycle of life, eating and being eaten. Ith's name perfectly fits with this concept, implying a general kind of pap or grain. As Ith is the first son to leave Breoghan's tower, Viraj is the first offspring of the Brahman. See Manusmriti 1.32, Rig Veda 1.9.5, and compare also Shiva Purana 5.1.8.22. And this Viraj can be presented as either male or female. Viraj is called the cow of plenty, who the gods milk to give life and substance to all things, is a secondary creator figure and an intermediary between Brahman and the creation. All of this fits Ith perfectly when seen as the first son who departs Breoghan's tower, and who causes the creation or the invasion, and is killed after going to Mac Graine, and this points to a further alignment of Ith, or Viraj, with the cow Authumbla in the Norse version of the creation myth. Viraj is identified with the first creative principle, see Atharva Veda 8.9.7, is called the immortal, widespreading ruling power, Atharva Veda 7.84.1, and is identified with cosmic speech, or Vak, as in Atharva Veda 9.10.24, while Ith is cryptically called of tuneful fame, associating him with music or speech. Ith goes to Ireland where he meets the king Mac Graine, who we have shown is equivalent to Ymir, since the marriage of Mac Graine and Eriu is the union of earth and sky. Thus, the meeting of Ith and Mac Graine is the equivalent of when Authumbla gives her milk to Ymir, who is Mac Graine. As already mentioned, Viraj is the great life-giving cow, whose udders are the frame of the cosmos. See Atharva Veda 10.7.19. Viraj is said to be killed in his form of the myth, as if, likewise, is killed. Another of Breoghan's sons is called Fuat, meaning wood. Since the Brahman is the absolute, the sons of a Brahman figure would be like aspects of the Brahman itself. We can see that with Bile, Muirthemne, and Ith, all are easily interpreted as aspects of Breoghan. Brahman in the Vedic understanding encompassing all of these. As for Fuat, meaning wood, the Brahman is indeed said to be the wood of the cosmos, which is pictured as a great house built of the wood that is Brahman. See Taittiriya Brahmana 2.8.9.6 through 7 and Atharva Veda 9.3.19. This understanding provides an esoteric interpretation that places Fuat in context as a well-documented aspect of Brahman, and thus the esoteric identity of Fuat may be one more uncanny detail, tying the Irish and Vedic cases closely together. Right where we expect a quality or aspect of the Brahman, we get a very unique word that ends up being well attested as just such a quality: wood. Other names of Breoghan's sons are perhaps even easier to understand as aspects of the highest Brahman figure, translating as noble, beautiful, strength, fame, bundle of sticks, presumably the essence of the sacrifice, etc. We thus see our ancient theology, and it would be exceedingly difficult to wrestle these Gaelic deities away from the meanings they have in the Vedic context, due to their near identical positioning and uncanny shared quirks within a complex system of metaphysical concepts. The Brahman has his tower. It is the source of all. Its first emanation is esoterically a cosmic food, which acts as a first cause of creation, and which first of all goes out to the sky-earth unity, that is Ymir or Mak Grania and Eriu, and is absorbed there in some sense, either dies or its milk is swallowed. From this Brahman is then born the sacred tree god, who is equivalent to the whole realm of existence, and also the Dark Waters, who the world tree god is juxtaposed to, emerging and differentiating himself from these dark waters in most versions. The other sons of the Irish Brahman, at least, are then aspects or qualities of him. He is wood, beauty, noble, strength, etc. The world tree god, the lower self of the pillar lord, Brahman, is father of desire, which is his own auto-generated overflowing. This desire gives rise to or begets the Rudraic god, a sort of emanation of the fiery intellect. The name Finn or Fionn meaning the knower. This fiery intellect of the world tree god, his father. And this Rudraic god divides the primordial union of earth and sky to create the world. The quirks shared most clearly between the Irish and the Vedic case, which justify the strong identification of Irish and Vedic versions, are 1. The Irish Brahman figure sharing a root word with Brahman. That is, the names Breoghan and Brahman sharing their roots. 2. The Brahman figure having a pillar or tower as his primary symbol. 3. The first emanation or cause being identified with a universal food, and this emanated divinity then dying. 4. The being, who is the grandfather of the Rudraic god and the son of the Brahman, being identified with the sacred tree. This connection, this identification of this god with the sacred tree, is not clear in any other branches besides the Irish and the Vedic, to my knowledge, thus creating a perfect alignment between them. 5. Wood being one of the esoteric qualities of the Brahman, since the universe is seen as a house made of the Brahman. And 6. The Irish Brahman is also called both wrathful, and gentle, reminiscent of how Vedic absolute deities are often treated. To claim that any of these particular alignments could have been added into the Irish texts by Christian monks or Platonists would be laughable. None of these concepts are present in Platonism or Christian metaphysics. Their only close match is in Vedic tradition. You do not find the first cause being identified with food in Platonism, and you do not find wood being one of the primary characteristics of the absolute in the Platonist or Christian metaphysics either. Thus, the Gaelic material has preserved a royal flush in the game of accessing the primordial Indo-European tradition. The Welsh case only further supports the Irish. When we look to the equivalent genealogical position in the Welsh mythology, we find Dynwal Molmud. Thus, looking for a great ruler of a tower or some sort of axis mundi, we find a king whose name either means the world king of the silent bare mound or the world king who is silent and bald. Breoghan's most sacred epithets endure, scattered throughout the Gaelic texts. Hail Breoghan of the tower, the wrathful, the gentle, the good, he who is strength, he who is noble, he who is fame, he who is the beautiful, the food, the wood, and the ember of the universe, who contains both the dark waters and the sacred tree, the warrior, the builder, the shining white, without falsehood, of the combats, of the valorous deeds, of the shouts, the ever victorious. My book, Taliesin's Map, the Comparative Guide to Celtic Mythology, is available from Amazon. Link in the description.